Welcome to the Brilliant Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Rose, and this podcast exists to help illuminate the path ahead of you. With expert interviews, clinical pearls, and real client success stories, my intention is to bring you hope for what's possible on this journey and to give you tools and resources to navigate the ups and downs on the road before you. If you find this podcast helpful, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And I have a big request. If you have a minute, can you leave us a 5-star review? And let us know, what did you learn? What did you come away with? Did you leave with that spark of hope? This helps more people like you find the podcast. My mission is to support as many humans as possible on their path to become parent. And by you sharing and subscribing, you're part of that mission too. And I'm so grateful for you for being here. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about, something kind of could be a little gritty for some people. Holiday survival. When someone has been trying to conceive, when there have been fertility struggles, holidays can often be some of the toughest time to get through. Maybe right alongside Mother's Day, but Mother's Day is at least one concentrated day with, some days surrounding it that can feel triggering, whereas the holidays are like weeks that can feel endless. So we're here mid-November, and what I am hearing from my patients, clients, members of the Brilliant Fertility Program is that it's starting to build right now, this tension, this dread almost of holiday gatherings and the end of the year time frame too, like this energy, this pressure of wanting this year to have been the year and feeling like if it hasn't happened yet, I've failed. And this is another year that has gone by wasted. So even though I might not have all the solutions in this one episode, I want to give some holiday survival tips and help you see that you are not alone. I hear you and I see you in this level of emotional vulnerability during this time frame. So some of the specific things that my patients and clients have brought up to me recently. Number one is people commenting on whether or not you're drinking, what kind of clothes you're wearing, if there's been any body changes. And if by chance you are listening to this and you do not have fertility struggles, just, a friendly reminder that it's never okay to comment on someone's body. And we might have the best intentions when we ask someone like, oh, you're not drinking. Does that mean you're pregnant? But we have no idea what might be going on in someone's life. And to make those types of assumptions can actually be really painful. So deep breath there. And maybe also remembering that when people are trying to get pregnant, you're asking a really intimate question. And unless you genuinely feel comfortable asking someone about their sex life, why is it okay to ask about someone's pregnancy status or when they're going to start a family? Because it's essentially the same question. It's just, with a different outcome in mind. So maybe keep that in mind as well. So if you are, going into the holidays and you've got a lot of gatherings that you feel maybe obligated to go to, maybe you actually want to go to them. But I think number one is you deciding what you want out of the holiday experience. If you genuinely want to be connecting with people, if you love going to the work holiday party, if you love having your annual girls' holiday night, then that's wonderful. You may have to set some parameters for yourself. And if you have a few close-knit friends in that crew that you can share, like, hey, I know that sometimes people ask these questions and I don't feel comfortable talking about this. If you hear someone asking, could you be my wingman on this and please just change the subject really quickly? I personally have pretty much dropped all giving of fucks in these situations now that I'm outside of my fertility journey. And my husband and I were actually at a wedding a couple years ago, and I overheard his brother asking someone, if they were going to have more kids, or what their time frame was. And I just immediately jumped in and said, "Oh, that's not the most appropriate question to ask. How about we talk about baseball instead?" And his brother was a little bit, oh, why is that not appropriate? And I just explained, like, we never know what's going on for someone. And this is maybe not the time and place for that if this isn't someone that you know really well. And bringing it up at like a large group setting might put someone in a really uncomfortable situation. Uh, so if you have a wingman, I would definitely ask them to kind of help in that role. If you feel like you are not quite ready to say, hey, you know what, we have been struggling, it's not been easy, and I would rather talk about something else, because that takes some gearing up for. And if you have not had the opportunity for that nervous system regulation ahead of time, or to mentally prepare for those questions, then it can almost feel like you just don't quite know what's coming. And that's a really uncomfortable place to be. Another tip for these encounters is, if you haven't already downloaded my 5 quick and easy tools for nervous system regulation, go ahead and do that as soon as you finish up this episode. I will link it in the show notes, but we have 5 tools in there that are less than 5 minutes long. And the first one, this energy bubble that you can create, is really, really powerful. I think you might underestimate how powerful this can be, because you're essentially visualizing this bubble of protection. And I began using that tool about a decade ago because, the energy exchange that I have with my patients and clients is really important to keep clean. Like, what's mine is mine, what's theirs is theirs. And when I am able to keep that healthy separation, it really allows me to be a more effective provider while allowing my empathy and my compassion out. I'm not taking on any of their stuff. So if you're a really sensitive person, if you find that people tend to just like dump their stuff on you and you're always the caretaker, setting this boundary, starting with your energy, can be a really powerful way of starting to set the stage for my next tip, which is setting boundaries. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, I think we all know how good setting a boundary can be in the long run, but no one really ever goes much into, in these like brief engagements, like, how do I set that boundary? How do I feel good about that boundary? How do I maintain that boundary? And how do I even know what the boundary needs to be in the first place? So the first thing I would watch for is, have there been situations in which you have felt anger, resentment, bitterness, or you've noticed that there's people that you would love to engage with, but you have found yourself really dreading being around? That's an indication that there may need to be a boundary set. And, coming into this time frame when, maybe in-laws are one of them, or people at work, being able to acknowledge what that looks like and start small if you need to. Maybe it's the boss who says, hey, can you stay 5 minutes to just finish up this one thing when you were already clocked out? And you can say, no, I'm sorry, I can't tonight. If you usually feel inclined to give a full explanation, like, oh, I can't tonight, I'm supposed to pick up my husband this time because we're meeting someone for dinner, I would invite you to give yourself permission to leave the explanation off. and just sit with the no and remember that no is a complete sentence. I'm currently in a phase of no. I've had several requests for interviews, being on other people's podcasts, meeting up in person locally for networking. And while I generally love those things, I am very much just in a phase right now of wanting to be with my family, wanting to rest and use these tools for myself and take care of my home and the building that we are in the process of creating. And I've had to say no and even cancel a couple of engagements that a couple of years ago I would have felt so much guilt and charge around. And being able to say, you know what, now's not the great time, let's circle back to this in a couple of months, feels so freeing. But it really started with me using some of these tools from the 5 quick and easy nervous system regulating tools, especially this, energetic bubble. So what else to look for with boundaries? If you notice that you are feeling charged around a situation or person, if you can start with a small boundary and just gradually, build yourself up with confidence, knowing that like, I can do this. And ultimately, boundaries are for people that you love and you want to keep in your life. If you're not willing to set a boundary with someone, if you're not willing to communicate with them, then I would argue that maybe it is just best not to spend time with them, period. Maybe they are not for you. If someone is not rooting for you, maybe that's a relationship that needs to be reevaluated. This is, of course, not medical advice. Please talk to your therapist about this in more depth if you need to be evaluating those relationships. But this experience that I've had personally and with my clients and patients over the last 11 years really has shown that there are going to be some people who just aren't for us. And there is nothing like an infertility journey to really bring some of these issues front and center. All right, what else about boundaries? I love to use emotional freedom take, otherwise known as tapping or EFT. I love to use EFT anytime I'm feeling uncomfortable around setting a boundary or speaking my need or stepping into my power. And ultimately, setting a boundary is about stepping into your power. And I don't mean power in the sense of maybe what we are witnessing on the political stage of like this kind of grotesque patriarchal control. What I mean by power, especially in the context of someone who is standing up to get their needs met, to be able to stand in their truth, to be safe, to be vulnerable, means being true to yourself and being able to recognize when your power has been taken from you, when you have allowed your power to leak from you, all the little moments that have likely accumulated over life, it adds up. I remember doing this meditation about a year ago. It was at a big conference, and it was a hypnotic style meditation, which I was like, oh, I'm glad I'm trained in hypnosis because I know exactly what they're doing here. And it asked us to go back to a time when we noticed that our power was leaked from us, and to notice like what is the color of our spirit, and that when that power is leaked from us, it's almost as if a little bit of our spirit has been taken. There's a fragmenting process that has happened. And in this meditative process, we were asked to, call that bit of spirit back, almost like visualizing that light of our spirit being able to come back to itself, bringing ourselves back into wholeness. It was a beautiful process. I took my own spin on it and recorded a version of it for our Brilliant Fertility Program members last year. And so far, it has been one of the favorite meditations that we've gone through. And it's really been an honor to be able to help people step into that personal power. So when you are looking at setting a boundary and you're feeling uncomfortable and you don't even know where to begin, it can also be helpful to look at, all right, what are some other situations maybe in which I felt powerless. And if you're working with a really traumatic situation, like please work alongside someone who is trained in how to effectively facilitate the processing of those types of situations. But these can happen in very seemingly small moments as well that have a really powerful impact. Uh, my example from the meditation from last year was that it took me to a time in third grade when my third grade teacher had accused me of lying about something. And like I had no idea what this woman was talking about. It was, something that a classmate had told her that I had done that like I was completely clueless about and hadn't done. And like I carried that with me for 30 years. And the way in which it manifested was almost like a fear of standing up to someone who was in a figure of authority. Because, teacher is an authority figure, a doctor is an authority figure, a boss is an authority figure. And the way that I carried that around was just like being afraid to step into my own power, having this distinct sense of like almost wanting to curl up into a little ball and hide anytime it was time to stand up for myself. So I think if we have this understanding of where things started and we have tools to call it back to ourselves, that can be really effective in setting the boundaries. I've gotten a little off track here, but but in general, I want you to see that there's choices. And if you don't want to go to the party, if you're actually kind of like a homebody and you love the idea of curling up at home with your hot cocoa and just watching a movie with your partner and not being at some big old party, like this is an opportunity too to be able to set that boundary that just simply says, no, this doesn't feel in alignment for me this year. I hope you guys have a great time. And be able to let go of any guilt or fear that people won't like you because you didn't go to the party, uh, and use the tools like tapping and EFT to help neutralize the charge around those feelings. If there's particular people that are triggering and maybe it doesn't feel safe right now to communicate vulnerably with them or set that boundary with them verbally yet. One exercise that I use a lot in practice is writing letters. And before you freak out, you don't have to send a letter to anyone, but this is part of the processing. So if there's, an in-law or your sibling or a coworker that just always asks the wrong questions or they always make you feel like a heap of trash, the opportunity to write a letter and just sort of dump the bucket, get everything off your chest that you've always wanted to say. And I know that, for someone who often lives in the realm of like, oh, well, we want to stay positive. Like we don't want to create like a complaint trance or problem trance. I'm not down with toxic positivity. I think it's really important to be able to be honest. And sometimes part of that means just like getting it all out. So that's why I say, like, you might not send this letter. This is just an opportunity to get everything on the table. There's another step here, though. The next step is imagining that you could step into that person's shoes and write back to yourself everything that you would need to hear from this person to help you feel seen, to help you feel validated, to help you feel heard. And notice what sort of healing begins to happen through that process of noticing how they would talk to you in the way that you would need. There are certainly going to be situations where you may never hear those words out of that person's mouth. and that's okay. But when you know what you need to hear, this also allows you to start exploring, well, what might that boundary feel like? And when it's time for me to step into my power and ask for what I need, how can I do this from a very honest, regulated place where you can trust that you did the best you could? Okay. The next piece about holidays, I think, is just the general emotional charge on grief and things not having played out the way you might have expected. Another year gone by where you're not opening Christmas presents with your own children. Another year gone by where your parents are sad that they aren't grandparents and feel called to bring it up. That grief, I want you to go back to our earlier episode with Jessica Field, where she talks about that disenfranchised grief of infertility and loss, because it's often not recognized societally. And giving yourself an opportunity to grieve, maybe with your partner, maybe by yourself if you process things differently, maybe with a friend who is really effective at holding space for these situations. That could mean writing a letter to this baby that you've longed for so long and just letting them know, like, I feel really sad that you're not here. And I honor whatever your spiritual path is in getting here and whatever timeline that is. And I feel sad. Being able to really acknowledge that and not have to carry that around in its entirety by yourself through this season. Being able to have that vulnerability with at least one other person who can just say, I see you, is really, really effective at lightening that load. When we're jumping into what's supposed to be like extremely festive and cheerful. And I would argue that, beyond infertility, like so many other people have reasons for not enjoying the holidays. And when we have to put on this mask that like everything's great, I'm so excited about pie, it's like that's exhausting. So when you can have that moment to be honest and say, like, I'm really not feeling it. Like I want to feel it. I really would love to enjoy this, but right now I'm feeling really heartbroken that what I dreamed for myself hasn't come to fruition yet. And finding that tool or practice or ritual or ceremony to honor it is a way of really giving back to yourself. One of my clients in the Brilliant Fertility Program has recently crossed, one of the more painful milestones that isn't talked about in the general world of, having had failed embryo transfers and realizing that she was around the anniversary of that and how sad that felt. And even though so many people in the world would be like, what are you going to do? It's just a bundle of cells. When you've been through that process and you had this whole potential life imagined, and there's so much just like physically, mentally, emotionally, financially that goes into the creation of that embryo, we do want to be able to honor that. And so my suggestion was that she and her husband take an opportunity to create a ceremony for those embryos and acknowledge the potential that they held and all the feelings around that, and either find some time to go out into nature, write a letter, create some art in their honor, and really find some presence with that. that's just one way that we can be true to ourselves in this phase. And especially with all of the energy of the holidays, giving back to yourself in a way that also allows you to bring more joy in. So we can have that duality, right? We can have grief of what hasn't happened yet. And as we become very honest with that grief and find the safe spaces to be vulnerable, make room for joy and connection and fun and even more unconditional love in the world. All right, the last bit that I want to address, and we will get into this in January as we do our annual fertility intentions workshop, which I'll probably be kind of wrapping into a virtual retreat, is that energy, that pressure that comes with the change of the year. And it's kind of wild, right? Because at the end of the day, it really is just like December 31st rolling into January 1st. It's just another day. But there's so much charge on it, in part because our society has put so much emphasis on resolutions and goals. And, it's like that end of year is like a big piece of like a businesses like goal setting. And so there's just a lot that goes on with that year change that can put the pressure on and highlight the grief of something not having happened yet, or the pressure of like, okay, well, it's a new year and it's on. I often see at this point in the year, mid-November, as that holiday season approaches and the new year is like looming, is there's kind of two sides that people can fall on. One is well, hasn't happened yet this year. Fuck it. I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I'm going to drink whatever I want. Like, I'm not even going to think about getting pregnant because like there's just too much going on. And I might as well just wait for the new year. And then there's the other side that's like, all right, I've got 6 weeks left. I'm going to go balls to the wall. I think I'm just going to put my nose to the grindstone and try even harder with all the things because like there's still this one cycle left that it could happen. And there might be some, people in the middle who have already made peace with like where they are in that moment. But for those two extremes that are, on either side of that part of where that year falls, is neither one of those energies is highly effective for inviting in and expanding. And on one side we have like some resignation, on the other side we have like all this pressure. So I think just re-familiarizing yourself with that energy. I think I don't remember which episode it was towards the beginning of the podcast, talking about the feminine energy of conception, which is this expansive, receptive way of being, and how you can view this next several weeks instead of being like, I'm either just going to give it up, totally like put it out of my mind and do whatever I want, or try even harder, is taking a breath with that and saying, how can I invite in a more expansive energy over the next 6 weeks? The quality of questions will always determine the quality of your life. So when you are faced with an opportunity to get curious or make a change, the question you ask is going to be vital to what happens next. So as you start to lean into that question of what would make this a more expansive energy, what would invite in opportunity for more joy and genuine connection and feeling like anything is possible. And instead of throwing it all out the window and eating all the cookies and drinking all the wine, still having a wonderful, beautiful respect for your body and all of the things that it is doing well, even if you're also mad at it for not having gotten pregnant this year. And instead of punishing it, because both situations is sort of a punishment, right? Like, I'm just going to do whatever I want, or I'm going to work so much harder. It's like that punishment is a very restrictive energy. And so looking at like, how can I nourish myself? How can I learn to trust that I'm doing enough? How can I remember that all of these things add up and have influence on how my body functions, how my hormones functions, without trying to control or nitpick on the things that we don't truly have control over. So this is an invitation to just continue nourishing yourself, taking care of yourself well, not with that end goal of mind because you have to get pregnant, but just you are deserving of health. You are deserving of feeling good. You are worthy of feeling good. And if you know that just going off the rails and eating tons of sugar and drinking all the wine doesn't make you feel good, and you're going to be in a pool of regret by the end of the year, then looking at, all right, well, what would it look like to enjoy a glass of wine with my friends and also continue to nourish myself and getting enough protein and getting enough sleep and staying hydrated? We covered a lot of stuff in this. And as always, I want you to know that I'm here for you. There are people out there who understand exactly what you are going through. And if you haven't found your tribe yet, just shoot me a DM. Let me know that you need someone to root for you. And I will be right back in your DMs letting you know that you're not alone. In the show notes, I've included a recording to an EFT tapping on getting through the holidays while trying to conceive. And we also have the 5 quick and easy tools for nervous system regulating. And I'm just sending you so much love during this season that you are able to find exactly what you need to bring more joy in. And wishing you a happy holiday season, whatever that may look like for you.